Hey, welcome to the next episode of the WIP Workshop. It's been a little while since I posted one of these, but luckily for you, I've actually been working on a bunch of other content for the channel. I've actually got stuff scheduled to be uploaded, basically like once a week. You should be getting more like 2 or 3 videos a week now for probably until about April. So I've been working hard, got lots of a backlog of nice videos, so get excited. But I have taken the back wheel with a little bit of WIP Workshop, but you guys have still been submitting, so I got heaps that I can be recording on this show. So we're going to do another episode right here, right now. And you might be like, I forgot what the WIP Workshop is, Ben. What is this? Well, the WIP Workshop is a place where you can submit some of your own mocks. Of course, if you want to submit your mocks, you can do so through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. You can use that email for the WIP Workshop or for the Bionicle Inspiration Series, either one. You can submit your WIP photos to that, or your completed mocks if you want them on BIS. And then here on this show, we talk a little bit about those WIPs. I can say some advice for what I think you could do to advance the build a little further, tell you what I like about it, give you some tips and tricks, and we can just sort of discuss all that stuff. And even if your stuff isn't on the episode, I think it's always a really good thing to see what other people are building and sort of see some ways, because these are work in progress photos, you can kind of see a little behind the scenes things that you wouldn't have seen in the finished product. So you yourself might learn something, or with some of the things that I'm throwing at them for references or for ideas, you might be like, oh, that actually worked for my mock as well. So you never know what you might learn. So let's begin this episode of the WIP Workshop, episode 3. First mock that we have today is by Bionicle. Really cool mock. I'm liking this a lot so far. Interesting to see the little placeholder red foot here. So I think that's just something I'll quickly bring up first before we start talking more in depth about this mock. Nothing wrong with doing that. With, maybe you're building something and you don't quite have that piece that you want yet, but you're going to get it off a friend later, or you're going to order it online or something like that. But just for now, just put a little placeholder piece in there, nothing wrong with that, just so that, like, for example, this mock wouldn't really be able to stand up if you hadn't put that replacement leg in there for now. So there's nothing wrong with doing that just while you're working on it, just putting in some little placeholder things just to see how stuff works. You can always replace it later. That's a good idea. So yeah, I love how this looks. I love the torso on this the most. I think that's probably my favorite part on this. I'm always a big fan of that sort of tri-axle kind of design there. I like that it's sort of intentionally a little bit skinnier there and everything, and that there's kind of the gaps in the torso and stuff. It looks super cool, kind of reminds me of the Tabuhra torsos, because they kind of had that on the center there. So I think you've captured quite a kind of Bionicle aesthetic there. It looks very nice. I like it a lot. I also quite like the leg design on this mock, especially the lower legs here, using those Makuta feet there to kind of form the basis of the foot. That's a nice way to use that part, and I think that foot design, well, not that foot design, that leg design as a whole is just very nicely done and fits the rest of the mock nicely. Especially the fact that you've got those Visorak claws on the lower legs as well as the upper arms there. It's kind of that visual unity you're creating there. I think that's very, very cool and nice to see. I also quite like how you deliberately had some skinnier lower arms here. And that's very, very nice. It creates a really interesting aesthetic. And that leads me nicely into my ways that you could finish this whip. I really, really like what you're doing with this mock, with the sort of kind of sharper aesthetic that it has. I guess, with the Visorak claws on the elbows, on the shoulders there, as well as the legs. You've also got the claws on his fingers, the triaxis and stuff. He has this very kind of almost demonic, kind of like a robot demon kind of look. Like, he's a little bit sinister, but he's also kind of a little bit sort of high-tech and sci-fi like. It's kind of like some sort of mad scientist demon creation or something that he's used with some sort of robots and stuff. I kind of like that. And personally, I think that the mask actually kind of conflicts with the rest of the body a little bit. I think it'd be really interesting to play around with that. Whether you give it an entirely different mask or you actually go custom, because that was one of the things I reckon you could try, is doing a custom head, maybe something like this. So this is a mock by Leonid Arn and is called Preta the Demon. Something maybe like a head like this, kind of a very sort of sinister looking custom head, something like that, that's kind of got the teeth and everything. I think that would actually fit the mock really, really well. And if you don't like that custom head, here's another one that could work really well, which is a mock by Joxon called Son of Makuta Anger. Something like that. Again, going a bit more custom, but this sort of elongated, sort of sharp angles, kind of sinister looking head. I think that would actually fit really well with the aesthetic that you currently have. Because, yeah, you look at it, you've got a lot of those sharper angles on this mock. You've got the claws and this sort of more sleek torso, and I think that mask is a little bit jarring in that regard. I like what you're doing, and I think that, like I said before, it's kind of that mix between a sort of sci-fi guy and some sort of demon monster thing. I think that mask sort of leans it nicely towards that sci-fi look, but I think it detracts a little bit too much from the demon look that's also present in this mock. So you could go another way, of course, if you're adamant about keeping the mask. I reckon take away the claws on his hands and maybe fill out the torso a little bit more and maybe see what you can do with some of the, at least with the shoulder armor, how it kind of protrudes up. That looks a little more evil. So if you could kind of soften that area a bit and make it look a bit more kind of Toa-like, because I assume this guy's a Toa, that might be a good idea to kind of have a consistent atmosphere throughout the mock, I think. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, I reckon it'd be interesting to play around with some custom heads and do something like that. And actually, going back to the Joxon mock here, the Son of Makuta Rakshi mock, that spine design, it might be interesting if you did want to fill in the spine, or the back of this mock. Maybe introducing a spine like that, because that could, again, kind of lend itself to this looking more kind of demonic. Especially too, I think, angling that torso just a little bit more further forward and then introducing some kind of spikes like that, again, would fit really, really well. Even if you decided to change the legs up a bit and give it a kind of digigrade look, this could actually work surprisingly well for a custom Rakshi. Don't know if you want to go that route. Not everyone likes building Rakshis, although a lot of people also do like building Rakshis, so maybe that's what you want to do. But there you go. There's some of my thoughts, some of my 2 cents about what you could do with the mock. Oh, one other thing before I finish off, I always like to include a non-Lego picture just to spark your imagination a little bit more. This was another picture that I found online. I just Googled, I think I Googled like demon robot, because I was saying that's kind of what you've done. And I found this, and I really like the sort of accent color of that trans pink in there. It almost makes you think introducing some trans pink or just a nice sort of trans accent color onto the mock would work really, really well, I reckon. Introducing that nice accent color, something like that, would be something to play with. Who knows how that might look. And then something else I like about this mock is it kind of has a bunch of hair and stuff all over, but it also looks a little more kind of like wire-like, kind of like it's also a weapon of some kind. Might be interesting to play around with something like that. It'd be taking the mock in a different direction, but it's something you could do. I think that might be cool. Or a tail, even a tail like that. Tail might fit the mock as well. There you go. So that's it for Jay Bennicle's mock. Nice work, my man. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by... Oh god. I haven't got the name on me. I didn't put that in my document. Where is it? I gotta check the email. This was a submitted mock by Ryan Chen. Haha. And I don't talk with names. Oh man, I still do that. I still think this is Biss and I still want to say names. So in his email, he well, actually I should specify all these mocks were submitted. I didn't just pick any of these. But he gave me something he specifically wanted to talk about. So he said, this mock was inspired by Shadow Gear's mock Obelisk. I really adore how he turned the lower half of the spider... here is a picture of Obelisk. So you know what he's talking about. I really adore how he turned the lower half of the spider into a little face, and I wanted to do the same. I've been conflicted in building an arachnid lower half, or more of a humanoid thing. And in the face, I was trying to do a mix of futuristic helmet and spider mandibles. I'd like some guidance as to whether I'm blending too many themes and what to do in regards to the lower body. Sure thing, my man. I can do just that. So, I like that you're combining themes. I don't think that's a problem. I once saw a talk on creativity, and the guy was talking about how a lot of people don't believe they're creative. And the idea is you can take a look at a lot of inventions in the world that you'll be like, oh, that's genius. And a lot of them are just people smashing 2 ideas together. Like pillow pets. It's a pillow, it's a pet, it's a pillow pet. And that thing is making lots of money. And yet, it's a pillow pet. So, there you go. Or, for example, cronuts. It's a croissant and a donut, but those are a gift from God and they're so tasty. But yet, you're just combining 2 things together, and yet you're like, this is genius! And yet, logically, when the guy who probably invented cronuts was like, oh man, is this a good idea? I'm just combining 2 things together. No, it's a great idea. What are you talking about? But then, the guy in the actual talk was saying how he's like, here's my cool new idea. I've combined a notebook and a workbook into one. So now you can write in the notebook, and everyone's like, that's a stupid idea. And he's like, oh, you think that's a stupid idea? Well, let me show you this. And then he did this whole thing about how when companies buy notebooks, they have a budget for notebooks, but people can't, but that budget is super low because it's like, well, people just bring their own notebooks. But the budget for like workbooks with companies is massive because everybody needs their own everybody needs their own workbook. But then it's also this thing of like, by combining the notebook and the workbook, everyone now needs their own copy of that book, where previously they'd buy one book and everyone just works off of it. Now that everyone needs their own copy because it's a workbook and a notebook, so it's 2 in 1. And he's like, normally when I make my workbooks, I make this amount of money, but now that I've combined the 2, I make triple that. And he's like, you still think it's a stupid idea? So it's that thing of like, you combine 2 things together and it actually works really well. So if you're ever stuck with creativity, that's actually a pretty good pathway. Even if it seems a little bit stupid, most of the time it works. Take a look at any inventions. You'll find that. It's people just putting two things together, and it actually works really well. So I think what you're doing here is really creative and really clever, of just combining the two concepts together of that kind of arachnid look and the humanoid look. And, we've seen it on multiple different things in other kind of pop culture things. I'll get to those later when I talk a little bit more about that. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think you need to worry about, are you combining too many things together? I don't think that's a problem. I think a lot of people do that, and I don't think the issue is that. I reckon don't worry about that kind of thing. Like, you're not combining too many ideas. Great idea to combine things, awesome. But one thing I think would be interesting to look at a little bit more is just the color blocking on this mock. I think certain areas are becoming a little busier, which is kind of conflicting with some areas. You take a look at some of the smoother bits, like the arms here. They look mint. I love how they look. And then you take a look at sort of areas on the torso and stuff, and there might be a little bit more going on with the textures. So it'd be nicer to kind of smooth out some areas there, kind of have things flow a little bit nicer into each other. And that way things will look a little bit more unified. Because I think even if you did go into the spider legs after this, that's not going to be a problem, but if the textures are a little too busy, that might start to become a problem. So I reckon focus on smoothing out the rest of the textures on this mock, and then your multiple combining of things like the humanoid and the spider legs and stuff will look totally fine and will look awesome. So I definitely think advance forward with that. But if you're still not so sure about doing the spider legs, I do have a few ideas for you. But first, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let me tell you some of the other stuff that I really like about what you're doing so far. I love the custom head that you've got here. I do like how much it looks like a gas mask, and I do also like how much it looks like little spider mandibles there. I think that's awesome. Great job on that. I also think the waist head design thing that you've been inspired from Shadow Gear with, I think that's a great idea. I always like that, when people sort of, like, why do things have to be typically what they look like on a human? Why not put the mouth on another part of the body? I think that's a great idea. So I like that you're thinking outside the box with that. That's brilliant to see. And I just said before, the arms, the whole arm design there is very smooth and very nice looking. I love how you've put that Star Wars Ultra Build shin guard piece there on the arm. It creates a very smooth looking kind of atmosphere there or something. I love how that looks. And I also really like the tailcoat that you've got going on here on the back there. It looks really, really cool, and I think that's very fitting and looks nice. I quite like that. I reckon it might be cool to play around with the head design that you've got on this mock too, actually. Again, like I said, I love how it looks so far, but I reckon it'd be interesting to play around with the specific mask that you use on the back there. While the scope eye on the back there is a cool addition, because it kind of almost looks like some kind of aerial or something if you're going for that more kind of futuristic look for that helmet design there. But I reckon using any other kind of white mask, just having that smooth finish at the back there, that might actually lend itself to the aesthetic that you're going for, and I think could look really cool. So play around with some of the other masks, see how those look on there. Yeah, always good to play around with stuff, even if you do end up coming back to that mask. At least see how the others look. I think that might be beneficial. But yeah, like I was saying, so if you do want to go for the humanoid design, here's some ideas that I had for things that you could do with the lower legs here. So we're taking a look at a mock by Allura Molly Ray, and this is Mesky. And so this sort of leg design here doesn't necessarily have any feet. I think from some of the drawings that she's drawn, it's more kind of like they kind of just sort of end up in kind of cones at the bottom of the feet. And so it's sort of more that she's sort of floating and she's sort of holding herself up. I quite like that. And also if you did a design similar to what Mesky has here, you'd have that visual unity of using those Star Wars Ultra Build shins on the bottom and then also using them on the top of the lower arms there. So that would be cool to have that visual unity. And I think that'd be an interesting way to approach the legs there, is to have them not actually have any feet and to be kind of more futuristic in their sort of design and look like that. And another way to approach that, which is, this is a mock by Shadow Gear 6335 and is his version of Mesky. Here's just another way that you could possibly approach doing those legs, is just another sort of take on that exact design, basically. This one does have sort of slightly more kind of a foot, whereas the other one didn't necessarily have that, but I definitely think that it's still kind of close enough, and it kind of almost looks like those feet would kind of fold down and then kind of lock back into the legs. So maybe you could do a design like that kind of transforms in some manner. So that'd be cool. There's multiple ways that you could do that leg design. Or I have another one here, which is this really interesting kind of picture I found online for this really interesting kind of digigrade leg design. If you did something kind of like a bulkier version of that onto the mock, that could be a really interesting look. Quite out there, quite different. But hey, quite out there and quite different mocks are often the best. So there you go. But if you do want to go with that interesting spider design, There's been a whole bunch of those, like I was saying before. So something you could do is something like Spider Maul here. You could do something like that. So you could have the big old spider butt on the back there, and then have the legs kind of protruding down like we see in this image here. Or you could take a look at it sort of more from this perspective where the legs are actually emanating out of the butt. Before, it was kind of almost like a different segment. Like if you look at Maul, it's kind of like the body goes straight down and then there's a sort of separate segment where the legs come out of it and then the butt comes out of that segment. Whereas here, it's like that segment is just the... Is that the abdomen of the spider? I don't know my spider terminology, but the legs are coming out of the big butt. So you could approach it from multiple ways like that, and both I think look really cool. But I definitely think it would be interesting to kind of have each of those spider legs almost look like that design that I showed you before, kind of very robotic and very smooth in their style. Because like I said before, I think that very much lends itself to the aesthetic and feel that this mock has currently. So that'd be really cool. So thank you, Ryan. Let's move on to the next mock, which is by the Aura Master. Really, really love the head design on this mock. Really cool how you've taken that General Grievous head, flipped it upside down. That's always one of the coolest things about Mask, is that you can do that. You can just flip it upside down, and like we see here, add a few things to it and stuff, and it, you know, looks like a brand new mask. It's cool. I love that you've done that. I think that's really cool. I also really like how the waist on this mock looks. There's a lot of really nice system additions on this mock. You know, we see that on the top of the torso here as well as a little bit of system detailing on the upper arms here. There's a lot of nice system details there. Really like how that looks. And I also like how you're beginning that little sort of subtle, not really a dress design, that's not really the term for it, but kind of like a waistcoat effect with those Vorok's armor pieces there on the side. There's only one so far, but I imagine you'll put another one on the other side. I think that'd be very fitting and look very cool, because the one that's on that one side currently really, really works. I also like the cloak that you've put on the back there. That might be custom, I'm not sure. Either way, looks great. Love how it looks. And yeah, like I said before, the system blending on this mock is brilliant. You've managed to combine that very nicely with those CCBS pieces. It's really nice to see. So obviously on this mock, it looks like the feet need work still. So, well, not the feet, the lower legs and the feet. So here's some ideas that I found online. So the first one... This is an image of a Kalish warrior from Star Wars. These are what General Grievous looked like before he was a cyborg. And something that I like about this is this kind of has that sort of wandering traveler, desert adventurer kind of look to them. This kind of, they've sort of pieced together their attire from sort of cloth and things that they've found on their travels and stuff like that. I quite like that. And I really like how he has this look where he's not wearing shoes and he has these sort of sharper clawed hands and stuff like that. It might be really interesting to do that with this mock as well, actually, to have a sort of barefooted design and to maybe change up the color of the hands so that it kind of looks like he's wearing some armor, and then underneath is this, you know, his natural skin color, and maybe he's got a cool helmet on that's sort of maybe similar to this, which is ironic because that helmet is sort of a precursor to General Grievous's head, and you've used General Grievous's head, so that's really fitting. But I like this look, and I think it actually lends itself very, very subtly to what you're doing. So it might be interesting to take some notes for the legs here, sort of having that look of an unarmored leg design, and there's sort of the armor underneath. And whether that's the black, because you do kind of have that color blocking here, that the black is the underneath and the tan is the armor on top. So maybe you could just have the legs be black, and then you kind of have these sort of, you know, sharper clawed toes, and then the black clawed hand and stuff like that. That could work really well. And fit very nicely with what you currently have as well. Or yeah, you could do a sort of, I don't know, dark red or lime or something like that. That could work too. So yeah, just play around, see what you can do. And then this is a mock by Mr. Boltron and is called Tabuhra, the Spirit of Deserts. And something I like about this is, again, I think this aesthetic is very fitting to the mock that you've created. It might be interesting to play around with adding some more cloth, similar to how he's done that on the torso of this mock, as well as playing a little bit more with some of these Vorok's armor pieces. Again, they're very fitting for the look that you're going for, and they work really well on this mock, and I think they would also work really well on your mock. He's also got a cool gun and a sword on the side of his belt there. Might be interesting to add some little like accessories to your mock, whether it's weapons or little sort of trinkets that he's found on his journeys. I think that'd be really cool. And actually, also, I think the foot design on this mock is very fitting for what we saw before, or just a sort of slightly different updated version. Uses a bit more system and stuff, but I think it's really nice, and I think it would fit your mock very, very nicely. As would these lower legs too, actually. I think that would work really nicely as well. And you could easily do that if you've bought that General Grievous set. You'll definitely have a bunch of those pieces left over. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you to advance your mock a little bit further, and hopefully everything that I've said so far in this episode helps all three of you guys. Let me know if it did. Always happy to hear that. And of course, like I said before, if you want to submit your own whips to the WIP Workshop, you of course can. You can do so through the email that you're currently seeing on your screen. I just need some pictures, or if it's on a website, just send me a link to that in the email, and that's all I need. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully this inspired you. I'll see you in the next episode of the WIP Workshop.